If you had to land a plane with a busted engine, how would you do it? You most likely don't know the answer, and neither do I, but Matt Brown did. Matt Brown didn't have time to Google an answer. He needed to know how to land a twin-engine Cessna with a light load and a busted right engine, or he'd die. Excellence in any pursuit requires the retrieval of information from memory so as to execute without hesitation, and in order to do that, it is essential that we learn how to learn. And there's a word for this. It's called metacognition. Dramatic glasses removal. Dramatic dropping the glasses on the floor. I won't do the mic drop, though, because I have a guest with me today. He is the guest every day, which I suppose makes him a resident. Phil Johnson is a software engineer formerly on the project HoloLens at Microsoft. So he worked on holograms, and I am an opera singer of 14 years. I've sung with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I wanted to talk about recall and expertise and the necessity of that. Phil, you had a piece to say about software engineer interviews, which are the topic of a lot of discourse in the software engineering community. Care to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So the topic of today is recall. So the ability to summon information at your convenience. And it's typically said that in software, you have the internet at your disposal. If you need to look up a feature of your particular language of choice, if you need to look up an API, an algorithm, that memorizing these things is not particularly useful because you can just look it up when you need it. It's a common critique of the very standard interview process that is in the software world, where you show up and you are tasked with solving problems on a whiteboard, which means that you need to have all of those things at your fingertips. You need to know your language inside out, its features, data structures, whatever algorithms that are required to solve the problem at hand, any APIs you need to call. That's all stuff you need to have internalized for most of these interviews.
Can I point something out?
Sure.
You have a whiteboard behind you. How regularly do you practice that exact skill?
When I'm looking to switch jobs, quite a bit.
And you've been coding. I know he's my brother, so I get to cheat a little bit. You've been coding since 9 years old, right?
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah. You bought your first QBasic book at 8 or 9. So the man still has a whiteboard. Sorry, carry on. Just wanted to kind of point that out.
Yeah. So I kind of disagree with this element of the critique. I do think that the interview process in industry has problems, but the critique that you shouldn't need to memorize anything because you can look it up is, I think, a little misguided, and that there's a lot of value in internalizing the features of your language and algorithms that are useful for whatever your particular domain is. That you save a lot of time by just knowing stuff as opposed to having to look it up. And It's not just about solving the problem quickly and moving on, which is super valuable already, but also about building your mental model of what it is to write software.
And on the note as well, so building a mental model is incredibly useful when on forming an understanding. A little bit different is music, so when I was with the Philadelphia Orchestra, I was working with Yannick Nézet-Séguin, who is he's probably the most famous conductor right now. And we were going over, the project we were working on was Bernstein's Mass. And in Bernstein's Mass, there's a lot of complex meter. So what I don't get to do is I don't get to ask Yannick to educate me on what complex meter is, when there's an orchestra and every minute is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So less than a complex model, although that's certainly one, the mental model is definitely one facet. The other is just execution of a task in the immediacy. So in the same way that Matt Brown has a twin engine and has to sort of rely on the mental model, I need to know, in that instance, complex meter. So, Agnus Dei, qui tolla peccata mundi, miserere nobi. Like, I have to be able to change meters like that. And then I have to be able to know that so well that I have to look at his baton to know exactly what he wants within that framework. So, the mental models and the details of that model, you don't get into the details without the mental model, right? So I had to understand all that structure and then get into those nitty-gritty details, or I'm fired. Because that's expensive. Mistakes at that level are not okay, and I've lost work because of that. So, to segue a little bit, that's the importance of recall. Whether you're flying a plane, whether you're an aspiring engineer, whether or not you are trying to become a musician, there are reasons why this is important. And one of the things that I've been working on recently, and I'm going to bring you into this in a bit, Phil, but one of the things I've been recently working on is something that I've lost gigs over, which is the memorization of lyrics in foreign languages quickly. So I have a new piece of music I'm working on that's about 3 paragraphs in French set to music, no lines repeated. So I have to memorize that very quickly, and I've been struggling. So I have been testing a feedback loop using a video game called Valorant. We've talked about the importance of recall. We're going to move into how we develop recall. So the feedback loop is really great in video games. It's super fast because you win or you lose, you hit the shot or you don't. So it's a really great way to test a feedback loop at only about 15 minutes a day, and then the occasional maybe 40 minutes if you're going to play a match. So you've been working on something recently. You have been entering Guilty Gear tournaments, and you have been practicing a feedback loop of your own that I find very interesting. It involves a review system and all this stuff, and I'm just going to have you take it away.
Sure. So yeah, I've been entering weekly online tournaments for Guilty Gear, which is a fighting game, kind of akin to, think of it as a modern Street Fighter. And yeah, I will enter a tournament, lose, and the game will store those replays, and I'll tend to record those replays and upload them to YouTube so that I can review them anytime, anywhere. And in reviewing them, take particular notes. I'll usually have many notes on my gameplay. I'll make lots of mistakes, but tend to be patterns that are costing me most of my matches, and mistakes that are either repeated or just very important fundamental things I need to address. So I'll prioritize those mistakes and things to work on. And I have a daily practice routine. I wake up pretty early and start my day with this, and I will adjust that practice routine according to that week's kind of most significant mistakes. And so that tends to be something between 20 and 40-minute practice routine that contains an interleaved set of things to work on. Some of them incorporate the most recent mistakes I need to correct, and some of them are just fundamental things that I need to learn about my character.
I want to stop for a moment. You used the word interleave. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So interleaved learning. Human beings learn best by by stratifying the subjects that they learn. If you choose a task to improve on, and you pick a very focused way to improve upon it, like for instance, let's say in Guilty Gear, I had a particular combo that I kept not executing during a match, and I needed to work on that combo. If I spent all of my practice time, like that 40-minute slot, or 20 to 40-minute slot, if I spent that entire time every day doing just that combo, there are huge diminishing returns, and I probably could make the same amount of progress allocating 2 to 5-minute slots for that combo, and I'm missing out on improving on tons of other things. So, like, my routine might include 5 minutes of working on that combo, 5 minutes of sustained pressure against a dummy, 5 minutes of setting up uh, an offense against a waking opponent, like chunking my time up so that I'm learning many things at once. Uh, it kind of captures the idea of interleaving my learning, right? And that way I'm progressing along many axes at once, and it turns out a lot of those axes overlap. So I'm actually creating lots of different connections between my knowledge of different facets of the game, which makes a much richer understanding and makes me a stronger player.
And there is one thing that I want to interject here because I think there might be a misunderstanding or the potential for misunderstanding in what you're saying. You are not creating a checklist and then calling it done just because you spent a certain amount of time on a thing. This is a mistake I made when I was beginning to learn. If you are not paying attention, it is not good enough to sit down and do the thing. You have to sit down and pay attention to the thing that you are doing. So when you are executing a combo or trying to execute a combo and it's not working, how do you go about solving that? How do you go about thinking about, oh, this is not working, instead of just trying again and then having a timer that goes off in 5 minutes so that you move on?
That's actually a really great question. I'm not sure how to answer it without getting too much into the weeds on fighting game details, but I'll try. There is a process. I've been playing fighting games for many years, and there is a process of like troubleshooting your execution in a combo. That I've just learned through trial and error over the many years. But it is a very active process. I need to be paying attention. So in Guilty Gear, a combo might work on one character and not another because different characters are shaped differently, or they might be heavier or lighter, so they'll fall at different speeds. And this is something you have to pay very close attention to. So if you happen to be screwing up a combo, it might just be, oh, this particular character is too heavy, and this combo doesn't work, so I have to make an adjustment. Or it could just be a timing issue. You know, I didn't press this button on early enough, or I pressed it too late. And these are specific things you learn to look for. Like you might be inconsistent on one character and not another, and maybe it works on that character. It's just a little more difficult. The timing is tighter because of their shape or their weight. So these are things you do actively have to pay attention to, because if you're just repeating it and hoping it will suddenly fix itself, you're not going to make nearly as much progress.
I think this goes back to what you were talking about, your mental model. You know what I mean? You need a sort of scaffolding for the topic that you're trying to grow on. Like one of the things that I do in Valorant, you'd think that aiming is very easy. You move the mouse to the play. Like it's like if you've never played a first-person shooter game, it's like take a computer mouse and moving it from one place to another, and that movement, that where you're moving to, is given to you, right? So that sounds really simple, but in that there's the motion of the arm, the shoulder, the wrist, the elbow, your posture. All of that can affect the precision from A to B. And in a first-person shooter game, the precision is high and the time to execute is very, very low. So understanding these details is incredibly important. And unfortunately, in my case, I was a fitness instructor. I read the right things. Finding information is to create this scaffolding is incredibly hard. You've been playing fighting games for a long time. One of your good friends was an ex-professional player, your childhood best friend. How did you find the information to create the scaffolding that you did?
Honestly, a lot of it came from just playing a lot over many years. I had to discover it on my own for the most part. The level of detail in learning specific skills in fighting games, there isn't a whole lot of content devoted to that, or at least there wasn't when I was learning. That's probably better now. it did come from just experience for the most part, at least in my case.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up that I think is really important, because we started this podcast talking about incredibly high pressure situations that leave no room for failure. And one of the things that it's like a creed of mine, the opportunity to fail is incredibly important when setting up a practice environment and developing a scaffolding, developing an understanding, as you said, the stratospheric view, so that you can get to those details. And that trial and error really matters. So I guess it's hard to let's talk feedback loop, because I think that this is a premise, and I sent you something about this, and you had some contentions about the frame of it. But what I was going off of was information. So you have information, whatever that could be. Then the way you practice executing that information is you prompt. So you have a combo that you're working on. Where did you see this combo? Let's get like a little bit less into the weeds, less into the details. Where did you find this combo, this thing that you wanted to practice?
Sure. I usually find combos by watching good players, accomplished top level players.
Mm-hmm.
And I emulate their combo choices for the most part when I get started on a character, yeah.
And to just kind of give some different examples, so we have some different fields to reference. When I want to learn, say, the 3 paragraphs of French, Google Translate is a great tool for word, even if it's really inaccurate. It gives the general idea, so that might be a good place to start, where I get all my information and I do a word-for-word translation. So that's my information. So you get your information from watching a professional. I can get my information from either books or different software tools. So then we're going into prompts, right? So we find places to get information, and we're in the information age. So finding different information is easier, although discerning its quality is hard. But I think getting into communities would be great another time. So we have information. Then we prompt ourselves to recall that information. And so what do you do when you want to recall the execution of a combo?
Actually, that's another interesting question, because in my experience, it's not enough to go into training mode and practice a combo over and over again. Even if you find that in training mode you can execute the combo 100% of the time, it's very different. There's an apt Bruce Lee quote that, boards don't hit back.
I like the Mike Tyson one. In addition to that, Mike Tyson had a quote: "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face."
Right.
Yeah.
It's very different practicing that against a dummy that's not doing anything. The context, right, is very simple. It's you're practicing this combo against a dummy who's not defending itself, is not fighting back. And then once you're in a match and you have an opponent that you're fighting against, the opportunity to begin the combo will be a very, very brief moment in time, and you might have to react to that opportunity. Like, did they defend? Did they not? Did you land a counter hit? These are all things that might impact the combo you use, and you have to react in that moment and have the presence of mind to begin the combo correctly. And that's difficult. And the training mode tools do allow you to randomly kind of set up these situations. Like, you can turn on random counter hit, you can have the dummy randomly block, and this is absolutely crucial to being able to execute the combo in match, because you need to react to the opportunity being present. If you attempt to... Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to kind of bring it back to this idea of information and prompt. So what we're talking about is you get the information, so you know from watching a pro that you want to execute a certain combo and you want to practice a certain combo. So you don't just have one prompt for one piece of information. You have several for one piece of information to really instill the ability to recall at a moment's notice with virtually no latency.
Right. And it
Okay.
takes time, right? Like it's not the feedback loop is over many days, if usually, in the sense that like I might be able to execute the combo very quickly in training mode against a dummy who's not blocking or doing anything, but it usually takes me several days of consistent practice, maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, before I can react to the proper prompt, and more importantly, not react to the wrong prompt.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to attempt the combo against a blocking opponent, or else you'll open yourself up for counterattacks. So, and then I need to bring it into a match and see how that goes. I'll usually have to play many matches before I start to actually incorporate it into my game, which is also another conscious effort. And then at that point, the feedback loop is kind of complete. And then I can move on to working on something else and incorporating that into my game.
So one of the things that knowing myself, knowing my younger self in particular, I would listen to that and I would say, holy crap, that's a lot. Like, I get the concept. It's actually not too hard. You take the information, you set up a bunch of different prompts that force the recall of that information in a bunch of different scenarios. And then what you're telling you is you have to have the discipline to do it consistently for a short period of time. And by the way, for anyone who might doubt that, Mike Tyson used to practice in the mirror when he was coming up before he was heavyweight champion. When he was coming up, he would practice his punches, different punches in the mirror for no longer than 15 moments at the time. The greatest opera singers didn't sit down and practice for 1 hour. They would practice in smaller chunks, 5, 15 minutes. And there's a reason for this, because again, what we're trying to practice here is recall, right? It's the ability to go in the back of your brain and just grab that thing that was there. So the shorter intervals really help practice forgetting. You want to forget. You want to forget because you want to practice grabbing that information from the back of your mind. So this takes a lot of time. And that patience, I think, can be really, really difficult. And I want to bring up a quote that you gave me. I don't know where it comes from, but it's a quote that I have told myself to kind of ease my nerves, to increase my level of patience. A lot of folks overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and vastly underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. And those are some old man numbers. If we have any youngins listening, you're going to be like, yeah, that's like half my life, if not more. Talk about that. Because we have two different perspectives on this. A lot of what you've been doing in your life, you've done since you were very young, and I've been different. I started singing when I started training as a singer when I was 18, which is incredibly old for the industry of music. And FPS is new. I cut my teeth on real-time strategy games, so I haven't had the same time as you. So I would like to hear your perspective on patience and time. How did you develop your patience? Because that's an important skill.
Well, that's a good question. I'll have to think about that a little bit. I will say that it's true that I've been doing a lot of these things for a long time, programming, playing fighting games, but that my approach to learning them when I was younger was not nearly as informed.
Yeah.
I worked hard on getting better at programming, on getting better at fighting games, but I worked incredibly inefficiently. I didn't know how to learn. And I didn't have that same level of patience. I would spend that hour, on a combo, even longer. I remember when Marvel vs. Capcom 3 came out, there was a particular combo I was working on with Iron Man, and I remember spending an entire Saturday. It was like 6 to 8 hours on one combo, and I didn't get it once.
Yeah.
But this was the turning point for me, because I remember waking up the next day and trying again, and the very first attempt, it was easy. It just came, and I realized, oh my god, being away from that thing, there was a certain point during that 8-hour stretch where I was making no progress, no improvements, right? It was just falling flat, and it was actually walking away from it and sleeping on it and coming back to it that bridged the gap between I can't do this thing and I can do that thing. And that's what really made it click for me that, like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't spend 8 hours grinding one thing and expect that to pay off. Like, and that planted the seed for me of, like, if you really want to excel at something, it's going to take time, and grinding it out is not optimal. And
I think that's a great point to stop at. We're about 26 minutes into this video, and I think that's a great period to this. I think we'll have some talking afterwards where we talk about, I think, some of these things that we discussed. I think patience probably deserves its own video. And that's maybe something that we can think about and we can talk about. But until next time, reach out in the comments down below. I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter. Send me direct messages with any questions. Thank you for your time, Phil.
No problem.
I need a closer. Don't have one yet. So bye-bye.